Hey everyone. Okay. So this is something that I'm really passionate about, that I haven't really talked about previously. And I guess it's just can be a really complex issue. And I'm always like to be cautious of not oversimplifying a really complex issue, but I do want to talk about it because it is coming up more and more with clients and so forth. And it's an important thing to be aware of and understand what's at play and so forth. So, what I want to talk about today is tics, OCD, and even Tourette's and how that links with oppositional defiance disorder and so forth, because there's often a connection there. And I'm going to go into that in a minute. So, if you do have a child struggling, or maybe not even struggling, like some kids just have mild tics and it doesn't get worse. For a lot of kids, it does tend to escalate. Same with OCD. But if you have a child who has tics or OCD or who is actually really struggling, because if you do have a child with this who is struggling, you know that it can become quite debilitating and severe. And if you are in that place, it can feel like there's no solution, that you're just constantly managing this fire, so to speak. And too often, when you go to your doctor, it's written off as genetic, it's written off as mysterious. Very, very often, the answer is medication, possibly cognitive behavioral therapy. But, those are typically the main things that is recommended. So basically, what I want to talk about is that there are two factors that are involved with Tourette's and OCD typically. And I'm talking about the two because it's not uncommon for the two to go together. And in fact, what I've seen is that oftentimes, or I should say within the research, there's people who even argue that motor tics and so forth is a motor form of OCD, that it's like a motor form of a compulsion and so forth. To me, it doesn't really matter. The point is always that we understand more about what's causing it and what we can do about it. So, the number one thing I like to address and I like to look at is biochemical factors, particularly related to immune dysregulation, which is often provoked by things like toxicity, whether that's pesticides, heavy metals, and so forth, stealth pathogens, whether that's strep, Lyme, just viruses that your child's immune system is over responding to, that are normally pretty mild and so forth. So definitely looking at the biochemical piece is huge. And I should add that biochemical piece, looking into food sensitivities, inflammation, all of that all goes hand in hand with what I'm talking about with biochemistry. Number two is brain imbalance. So this is a piece that was really mind blowing because my daughter used to have pandas or pans, as many people who've been following me for a while know. And so we know all about tics and OCD and all of that type of stuff. And we really approached it from that biochemistry piece of looking at the gut and immune regulation and bringing down inflammation and so forth for a lot of years. And it wasn't until I stumbled upon functional neurology and what I do today with all the brain training that we learned a whole other piece to the puzzle that gets missed or overlooked in even pretty holistic circles, just because there's not enough awareness around it. So that second piece is brain imbalance. And so what the research has found is that most cases of things like pandas, tics, OCD, ODD, all that type of stuff, has to do with an overdeveloped left brain and a weak right brain. So again, this is not the same. I always like to remind people this is not the same as left brain and right brain dominance and the debate all around that. There is significantly more connections on one side of the brain and less activity, if you will, on the other side of the brain. So that's why it's weaker. So this left brain overdevelopment basically results in too much gas on the motor system, on our thoughts, on our behaviors, and even the immune system. So these kids are frequently hyperimmune. And that ties into the immune dysregulation that occurs and why their immune system might be over responding to normal microbes and stuff that other kids are able to just deal with relatively easily. So the very frustrating aspect is the longer these factors are dismissed and the more we rely on things like blaming it on poor parenting or stress, which I want to be clear, trauma and stress plays a huge role with all of this stuff, and definitely with tics and OCD. So I'm not implying that that's not a factor, but that was a very frustrating factor for us as parents when my daughter was going through this, because it was always related back to stress, which we knew for the most part, she was not under a lot, like any more stress than any other kid. And it was always, that was the only explanation we ever got was she's obviously stressed. And then come to find out that there was a whole other neuroimmune thing going on with her immune system attacking her lower brain. So poor parenting is often blamed. And so parents are often, told to take parenting classes, focus on stress reduction in the home, all of that type of stuff. Those things are never bad to do, but they're definitely not the end of the story. Number 2, genetic destiny. And I say genetic destiny because when people are told it's genetic, it's very frustrating for the parents who sometimes will say, we don't have any of this in our family. What are you talking about? Or somebody who might be like, yeah, we do have this in the family. And so then they're left thinking this is just genetic destiny. And then the parents are left with a lot of shame that this has been passed on to their child. And I want to be clear, genetic destiny, I don't even believe in that personally. And I can't even say personally, I'm basing that on the research around epigenetics that, yeah, we can carry a gene mutation, but it's that 3-legged stool of genes, diet, and lifestyle impact all come together, right? So we can really influence our genes. That's what the research in epigenetics shows. Just because you carry a genetic mutation does not mean it's expressed. And just because it's expressed does not mean it cannot be unexpressed, which I'm very certain we've done in my daughter's case. The other thing is only focusing on talk therapy. I was working with a mom about a year ago whose son had pretty severe OCD, and the only focus was cognitive behavioral therapy, which is great. I'm not knocking that. However, when a kid is dealing with this, likely there are biochemical factors going on. There are structural issues going on in the brain that need to be addressed. And if we just rely on parenting, and cognitive behavioral therapy thinking this is just genetic destiny, this is where these situations can get worse when we don't dig and unearth the other factors that are going on. So what's really required is a multi-therapy approach that is really critical to overcoming this. So number 1, optimizing brain biochemistry through things like detoxification, gut healing, identifying food sensitivities, regulating the immune system, all that type of stuff. Number 2, brain reorganization, right? So as many of you know, we do that in the program. We retrain the brain after we've done the advanced brain screening and determined which areas of the brain are weak, underdeveloped, all of that type of stuff. And then very critical, especially for this, is nervous system regulation. So typically, whether the child's difficulties are being exacerbated because of trauma or stress, or that trauma and stress have arisen because of what they've gone through with the tics and the OCD, because that can occur as well, the nervous system really starts to get dysregulated. So really working on regulating the nervous system is often a key component to addressing this as well, which we do in the Full Potential Formula. So let's just recap in case anyone's listening is going, I'm really not clear if my child has these issues and so forth. Let me know in the comments below if any of this sounds familiar, if you're seeing any of this, and so forth. So Tourette's or tics is the involuntary and repeated movement and vocalizations, where it's like a child. And what will happen with these kids is they might have a good day at school, right? They have that after school meltdown because they might be managing their tics or their compulsions all day, but then they come home and they fall apart, because now it's like their nervous system had to restrain so much and now it just needs to let down. So this could be something that is really affecting them at school, or it could be something that they're really containing if they're more self-conscious and hyper-aware socially, and then letting it all fall apart at home, which is why, it can be really frustrating again, because parents will go to the doctor or whomever and they'll say, well, if they're fine at school, but they're not at home, then it sounds like it's just a behavior, as if it's a choice, and it's just parenting and so forth. So to keep that in mind. With OCD, it's different in that it's intrusive thoughts and compulsive behaviors. And there's many different types of OCD, which I'll be talking about. I don't know if it's Thursday or next week. I have it planned, but there's different types of OCD. But just to be clear, OCD, unfortunately, we always think of the extreme examples, the kid who washes his hands 100 times. I definitely had a kid like that in my program last winter. However, there are lots of kids who it's just intrusive thoughts. So there's an insane amount of anxiety. It's not normal levels of anxiety. It's much worse than even a generalized anxiety disorder because there's these intrusive thoughts that they just can't let go of. So then there might be like phobias that come with that. And then from that, sometimes can be behaviors. And what a lot of parents aren't aware of is that sometimes these compulsive behaviors are very subtle. They're not aware that their child has some weird compulsive behavior to look over their shoulder every, 20 minutes or 10 minutes to help self-regulate an intrusive thought or worry. So it's not to make anyone overly paranoid. It's just to be aware that these things can be really subtle and easy to overlook. So really interesting with Tourette's, 86% of people with Tourette's have other diagnoses. So that's why I like to make it very clear that ODD, ADHD, OCD often go hand in hand with this. And that 1/3 of kids with Tourette's also have OCD. And as mentioned, some even argue that Tourette's really is a motor form of OCD. So when people think of Tourette's, sadly, they think of copralia, where, we watch the comedy and the person has Tourette's and they curse and swear. That's actually quite rare. That's a very small percentage of most people with Tourette's. Most cases of Tourette's or tics start as simple tics. They're very easy to overlook. They could be something like just this cute little blinking thing that your child's doing, or just a shoulder shrug that they're doing it when they're talking at certain points. It could be sniffling. It could be clearing one's throat. So those are just very simple tics and so forth. And they can be transient. In some cases, they can be transient, meaning they disappear. But oftentimes what I'm seeing is they progress into more complex tics. So as time goes on, it could be several muscle groups that are involved and more than one tic at a time. So they might sniff and shrug their shoulders at the same time. And so that's where it can become more debilitating, especially as kids get into those older grades where everyone's paying attention to what all the weird little idiosyncrasies that everyone else does and so forth. So the other thing I want to mention with Tourette's is it's really common for these kids to have ODD, what is known as rage attacks, where a child might be hurting others. It can be quite explosive. And also very, very more common is them hurting themselves, punching themselves, scratching themselves, picking at their own skin, really possibly doing pretty self-injurious behavior. So this is often related to brain inflammation and an overtaxed nervous system, which again speaks to why we need to address the biochemistry, why we need to regulate the nervous system, and of course, retrain the brain. So please keep in mind, all of this being said, that tics, Tourette's, and OCD has nothing to do with your failure or shortcomings as a parent. There's a lot of layers to this. As I mentioned, trauma can definitely be that kind of icing on the cake. Usually there is other factors going on a biochemical level, and then the trauma can kind of, just further aggravate that and so forth. So it's really due to multiple factors that are impacting biochemistry and neurological wiring in the brain. So I'm going to be talking a lot more this week and next week about tics, Tourette's, OCD, get deeper into causes and what are ultimately some solutions and so forth that you can do or start digging into if this is an issue. So do let me know if your child is struggling with any of this. You could either put it in the comments, send me a DM. It always gives more ideas on how I can further answer questions, provide information, insight, and direction, and so forth. So if you are interested in knowing more about our 6-month program, The Full Potential Formula, we do have a promo going on right now where if you sign up, you get the 7th month free. So reach out, book a clarity call. I'll put the link for that call in the comments below. And for now, have a fantastic day, everyone. Thanks for watching.